one of the best reasons to purchase a bulk box of meat is because of the array of cuts that you get to use and experiment with to feed your family. Now, having a look across this spread here, there's a lot that you probably haven't seen before unless you're a butcher or unless you are a bit of an experimental eater. So I'll talk you through what we've got here and what you can do with all these different cuts to turn them into delicious meals. So straight up, we've got some beef ribs cut crossways, and you can see in there all this fantastic intercostal meat, and it's really tough. So what you need to do is slow cook it. If you've got a smoker that can handle doing around 65 degrees, that's perfect. A nice rub or a marinade, something with, rich, sweetish, savory notes, something like a little bit of molasses on there or some barbecue sauce. Slow cook for a couple of hours. You'll know when they're ready because you'll be able to pull those bones apart and it'll just come out perfectly. Another one is the oxtail. So for me, whenever you've got meat on the bone, there's always more flavour. And the tail is a really intensely working muscle as the cow swats the flies away. And you can see all this connective tissue and all the sinew down there in the tail. Means that to fry something like that would be like eating an old boot. But when you cooked it nice and slow for a long period of time, all that connective tissue would break down and it leaves you with this incredibly rich and full-rounded flavour. So for something like that, a nice braise, you can put in a little bit of tomato sauce, but lots of time, lots of love. Another great one that I like to do with oxtail is with dark beer. And when it comes to winter time, you want to have those slow cooking, rich comfort food meals, and something like the oxtail is absolutely perfect for that. So that's a nice slow cooker. Then you've got the blade roast. Now, again, the blade coming up off the shoulder is something that could be a little bit tough, but tough isn't a bad thing. Generally, in meat, toughness equals flavour. That's the trade-off. So you just have to know how to handle it. So for something like a blade roast like that, I like to put it give it a little bit of a sear and put it in a slow cooker or like a big pot with some broth or some stock and some aromatic vegetables, and just give it a really nice slow cook. And that's a pot roast. And then after a couple of hours, probably more like 3 or 4 hours for a joint that big, you've got a really rich, delicious meal to feed a family. And I mean, something that size, that's going to give you a family for 4 dinner, no dramas, and then there's going to be leftovers for sandwiches and salads in the coming day. So a cut like that for me is a real time saver. You haven't got time to be spending all day in the kitchen. So rather than trying to prepare some elaborate feast, and I cook this kind of stuff all the time, is get a nice big tough cut of meat, cook it slowly for as long as you can. I usually put it on in the morning, and then when it comes to dinner time, you're ready to go. Easy done. So now we're starting to come across into some of the more famed cuts of beef, the ones that I guess we all more readily associate with beef. And we've got these lovely sirloins here, and that for me is one of my favourite eating cuts. You can see all that fat marbled and flecked all the way through there. So that means it's a nice, rich, juicy cut, perfect on the barbecue, nice high temperature sear on the outside, medium rare at worst in the middle, and you get as you slice through it, you'll see all that fat start to render out, and it'll be a fantastic steak to run over the barbecue. And there's not really a great deal you have to do with it. I mean, it's choose your own adventure when it comes to good quality steak. You've got your condiments, a little simple salad and some roast veg on the side, and what else do you need? So this one, the Scotch fillet, if you want to feed 6 people and you don't want to fry all the steaks individually, a nice whole premium chunk of meat like that goes perfectly. So give it a nice brown on the outside, into a low oven. Probably get yourself a little meat thermometer, and once it gets to about 65 degrees, whip it out, let it rest, carve it up. One of the nicest roasts you will ever have. So we've got just a rolled up beef roast there, nice big fat cap on there. So as that roasts and caramelizes, all that fat will render down through the meat, keeping it nice and juicy. Perfect for the Sunday roast. Again, the kind of thing where you can feed a family with that, and then come Monday, you've got plenty left over still for the school lunch boxes or for sangers and salads. Here is probably one of the most classic barbecuing cuts there is. That's the rump. So for me, the rump's a real great balance between a working muscle and a tender eating muscle. You get that flavour coming through because it does a little bit of work, but not so much work that it becomes tough to eat. And that, I mean, you can take that up into a couple of different portions. You could whack that through a stir fry if you wanted, but again, over the barbecue, the absolute best home for the rump. Then we've got a chuck roast, so very similar to the blade. Lots of connective tissue in there, so it's going to be a little bit of a tougher cut of meat to just cut steaks off and fry. But with a little bit of time and a bit of TLC, you know, I really like roasting these cuts of meat because they've got so much flavour. And look at it, you can see all that fat marbled beautifully through there. So again, give it a nice little bit of a sear and then cook it in a low temperature oven. That one will probably take a couple of hours, and then just carve it as you need. Personal barbecue favourites, and always hard to go past the beautiful T-bone. And what you're combining on the T-bone is meat that's on the bone, so you get that wonderful flavour. You've got a little bit of the sirloin on there and a little bit of the eye fillet on there. So it's one of those cuts of meat where you've got two premium cuts, you've got good fat coverage, and you've got the bone. When it comes to frying something up, I mean, that is about as satisfying as a steak can get. And then we've got the, I guess, the icing on the cake, a beautiful piece of the most tender cut, the eye fillet. And that's you know, you could either cut that down into little steaks if you wanted to, or if you were feeling a little bit more confident in the kitchen, give that a nice big season with some salt and pepper, sear it on the outside, and again, cook it in the oven to exactly how you like it. You can have that rare, I mean, really, if you brought that up to room temperature and you were feeling a little French, you could just give that a sear on the barbecue and eat it. Just slice it really thinly as possible, or you could just continue roasting it until it's however you like it. But because there's no fat on a cut of meat like that, if you are a fan of having your meat well done, I would steer clear from the eye fillet because it's just going to be a waste of money. Or I'd steer clear from roasting the eye fillet if you like your meat well done. I'd probably cut it up for something else, or cut them down into thin steaks and cook them that way. Because it doesn't have a huge amount of fat, it's very tender, but it's not very forgiving in terms of overcooking. So as little cooking as possible for the eye fillet. And then to finish it all off, we've got some fantastic beef bones, perfect for making stocks because there's no point in making a good slow cooked meal if you have to use stock out of a packet because the meal is only as good as its ingredients. Not to mention the whole raft of health benefits that come from consuming, you know, bone broths and stocks. Mince, always a great staple. Spaghetti bolognese, shepherd's pie, burgers, the whole gamut. There's always beef mince in my freezer at home for my family because it's always a quick, ready to prepare meal. And also we've got some great stir fry beef there. And again, really hot pan, a little bit of oil, nice and quick. You don't need to overcook that. Get the rest of the vegetables and the seasonings in there. Cook a pot of rice and away you go. And of course, last but most certainly not least, the humble sausage. So nice, kind of medium to low temp cooking on them. The worst thing you can do is just cook your sausages flat out and then prick them all. That's a little bit of a bad way to approach it, a little bit of a misunderstanding. Because when you're pricking the sausages, all that fat's escaping. You want to cook it at a temperature that's low enough so they cook through and brown, but not so high that the fat's exploding out. Because once it's gone after you prick it, it's all gone and we want to eat it because it's flavour and it's the moisture in the meat. So that is really what you're looking at in terms of a bulk box. There's about 15 kilos of meat here. There's 19 meals for a family of 4. And so that's beef 2 times a week. All these different cuts, so you can have a little bit of experimentation. Some good stuff, some slow cook stuff, some roasts, some bones, some mince. It's all there.